Hello, welcome to another Museum FAQ video. I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator at POW, Paul Orselli Workshop here on Long Island. And lucky me to be joined today by Ellie Byrom-Haley of the Gecko Group. And hello, Ellie, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Paul, nice to be here.
So I always like to start out by having people tell us a little bit about their background, sort of how it is that they ended up where they are right now. So if you could start us off with that, and then we'll launch into the main conversation.
Okay, it's probably what most people wouldn't expect. It's actually been a journey and somewhat of an organic journey. I studied painting and photography with no intention of finding actually necessarily a career in either one of those. I just studied because those were my passions. So through years of photography, I sort of got into graphics, and in that career just sort of kept growing until, I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur. Nobody wants to hire me, it seems, if I work in-house. So I just had to be out there on my own. But the business and skill sets just continued to evolve. And I just want to kind of backpedal here a little bit. I've always loved museums, and I just love them. They're like the Vatican to me. I think MoMA is my Vatican. I just love all museums and that experience and think they're so critical. So when I was in New York, I got the opportunity to work with the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and it was like, oh my God, amazing. And it was graphics, and that just kept growing and growing. And then pretty soon I'd find myself and my team in situations where we'd be asked to design something and that with the content, and it was like, oh, you gotta be kidding. This content is way off. And what the heck are we gonna do with it? So we sort of evolved into starting to help develop content and write and design the greater experience. So it's just really been an evolution over time until we now find ourselves a group that does exhibit design and wayfinding and interpretive design, and we wear many hats. So and have a number of disciplines. So it's really been kind of an organic journey, and fortunately along the way I have had the opportunity to meet and work with really exceptional people who have sort of stayed on board for a long time. So they're the smart ones. I'm just the person who signs the check. But it's been an exciting journey, and I'm really excited to be where we are now. I feel that working in this industry, in the museum world, and helping people have great experiences and learn and broaden their horizons, I think is just really very fulfilling for me. So that was probably long-winded.
Oh, that's great. I like to let people tell their stories, and that's a good one. I think it's always interesting, you know, though combining your passions and interest in museums, and now obviously you work with a lot of museums and other cultural organizations, of course. So that's great. You know, as long as I've known you, I somehow missed that you had a stint at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it was freelance actually. And geez, Kathy McLean was there. It was a few years ago.
No. I knew about Kathy. I picked that one up.
I lived in Manhattan, and it was a freelance project. So I did the graphics for, I think it was a project called The Mystery of Things. So I was very exciting. I especially just love the content. It's, as you work on these different projects, it reminds me of the Warhol quote, you're famous for 15 minutes. Well, we're kind of brilliant for 15 minutes on, be it a dinosaur exhibit or a zoo exhibit. So you really focus in on the subject matter. So I enjoy that opportunity to be exposed to new learning.
Well, the museum business is always, and what have you done for me lately? You know, that's what an impressive portfolio, and what have you done for me lately? But leaving that aside, let's launch into the conversation. You now, as the head of the Gecko Group.
Yes, did I miss that part? Sorry.
No, you that's good. And I know from working with you and the rest of your team that you well, you may sign the checks, but that's not all you do. So we want to talk about, we don't want to talk about signing the checks, but I am really interested because I know maybe especially really baked into the DNA of the Gecko Group are really the importance of integrating strong graphic design and also wayfinding. You work with a lot of zoos and outdoor venues too. So I'd like to talk about that because I feel, and I don't know how you feel about this, but it often seems like sometimes you'll be involved with a project where the graphic design elements and or the wayfinding elements sort of like bolted on at the very end. It's like, oh yeah, we'll take care of that at the end, you know, that we need, yeah, we need those things, but you know, don't worry about it too much now. So I'm wondering if you could maybe start off the conversation by being an advocate for strong graphic design and wayfinding sort of integrated into the beginning, from the beginning of a project, and not just sort of left as afterthoughts.
Absolutely. And it happens more often than not. Sort of finding that one of our big niches are zoos. So this is a classic example where they design the whole exhibit and then they say, oh, we're going to need some signs. Well, there aren't any places for signs because it's all rock or it's all this. And I mean, that looks really natural, right? Let's just hammer a sign up on a rock. So fortunately, zoos are now starting to have conversations with their interpretive designers earlier so that they can figure out, you know, how the content and the interpretive storytelling weaves into the actual exhibit. But we think the interpretive design aspect of it should be included, or AKA graphics and content development should be included in the schematic phase of any development. So actually even in the interpretive development. So otherwise you get to a point where you no longer have the option to do an optimal exhibit. You're going to have to like stick something here or stick something there. It's not serving the purpose of the content, and it's not serving the experience either. And it could cost you more money. I mean, because you might have to backtrack and redo some things. So instead of having designers, graphic designers and interpretive people work in silos, we think they should form a strong team at the very beginning of the process. There could be a lag in that graphic between, but they should be at the table up front so they know it's coming. I also think that people who have strong graphic design skills can help inform exhibit design. They come to the conversation with a different perspective. So I think by including those three-dimensional, two-dimensional perspectives, I think you can build a much richer experience. My humble opinion. And I also think that people think that graphic design is signs for exhibits. That is just a sign. It's really not. It's actually, it's part of the it is the interpretive storytelling, and it is contributing to the experience. So graphic designers can also help inform what materials might be used for the exhibition design. So there's a huge crossover that should be addressed at the beginning.
Yeah, I think you can tell what a museum team or an organization, you can tell the people or the specialties they think are important by who's there from the beginning and who just gets sort of kludged on to the end. So,
and it really it happens all too often, and it's very unfortunate. And I don't think people put, not all, I think some do, but they don't put enough importance into how that graphic design really is critical to delivering your content. And you know, we're just not slapping a bunch of pictures and some text on a panel. We're actually helping the visitor understand what's most important, what's the drive-by, the takeaway, what's the stuff you want to get into, and then what is tertiary, if indeed you want to explore that. So by really looking at graphic interpretive design that way, we can help keep visitors' attention, and we can actually really control what the takeaways are. So I think the role is critical, and like I said, should be addressed in the beginning. So they should be part of the team.
Oh yeah, for sure. And
Yeah,
also, I think the issues of taking into account, broadly speaking, accessibility and different
absolutely.
different learning styles, which
Yes.
obviously interpretive design and graphics and wayfinding
Hmm.
are all a part of, and not everybody is a big reader or wants to be reading big blocks of text as the only way to gather information and interpretation. So I think that's really important,
Yeah.
as you indicate. I'd be interested, just since you've worked on so many successful and award-winning projects in both the I'm going to say more traditional museum mode, and then also cultural institutions like zoos
Hmm.
with living collections.
Hmm.
What are some things that stand out for you? Like if you're going into a new project and you think, boy, these are people I haven't worked with before, and I'd really like to have them focus on a couple of key elements related to interpretive design. Like, what would you say to someone, either a new client or even to the people watching this video? What what sorts of things might be some of the real foundational and fundamental elements to target?
Well, and I think there are considerations that are different, and some of them. I'll go to zoos, for example, because they create and build. A lot of them sort of build new experiences, new exhibits over time, and each exhibit will have a different style, which is good. I mean, that they shouldn't, but the signage can just be god awful. They are particularly guilty of putting it last. Let's put some signs up as opposed to having it part of the situation. So I would advise a new client in a zoo to actually do an audit of their zoo-wide signage and just say what works, what doesn't work, what how does it impact the visitor experience, and do we need to change any of this? Do we really need to look at it? I think audits would be critical, especially as the years have passed. When we address learning styles, we really know we're paying attention to our citizens with disabilities and people who don't want to read the text and people who really want to touch something and that other person who really likes the pictures. So, and how families learn together. So we really have to assess the signage and the content and design based on those things. Is it working? And then put together a plan to change it. I can pretty much tell you that many of those institutions really should go back and address what I'll call legacy exhibits that have really dated over time and no longer are applicable to what we know about learning styles today. And
And and
what
in
we
uh, and in broad strokes,
Mhm.
what's involved? Like if you were going to a zoo or a large institution that has a legacy, as you say, of different exhibits over time
Mhm.
and different styles, what in broad strokes, what does that sort of audit look like from your perspective?
Um, well, it looks like a clear assessment, documented pictorially with an assessment and I call it a diagnosis. This is our prescription for you, please. But and it also would include a plan, and it would also call what is the reality of this, because as we all know, most of our cultural institutions are underfunded, the staff's overworked, and some of these things aren't nearly as important. So it's a reality of actually implementing something to sort of change up our interpretive situation within those institutions. We are seeing a lot of museums, like natural history museums, piece by piece go through their exhibits and update them, you know, um, do a lot of work to preserve the objects or the collections, especially in natural history museums. But it's a plan. It's an audit, it's a diagnosis, and then it's a prescription. So And then it's a
Well,
reality check.
yeah, well, I was
What's
just gonna say,
you got the time and money?
it's a reality check, and you hit the two hard realities for most
Yeah.
institutions: time and money. But at least if you take a step back
Hmm.
and you can prioritize those things, maybe
Hmm.
you can't do everything all at once, but
Right.
you can bit by bit, make things better. I think that's great, because
Yeah.
otherwise it's just sort of this overwhelming mess, and then nothing
Yeah.
happens. So
Yeah, absolutely, bit by bit. And I think we send out a wayfinding audit for a particular year or so ago. We did one just to, because we know that people are like, God, where do we start? What is it like? So you start asking questions, and then you do put together a plan where it is bit by bit. And, it's kind of like cleaning out your closet, isn't it? You just open the door and go, whoa, I'm shutting that door. Thank you very much. But you really do have to put it together in a practical way.
well, I think, it's interesting you say cleaning out your closet. I often think of these difficult museum exhibit
Mhm.
situations or museum situations. You sort of have to break it into manageable chunks, or
Mhm.
else it will just never get done, because it
Right.
just seems too daunting or too overwhelming. If you look in the distance at the top of the mountain, you're like, how the heck am I going to get up there? And if you just start taking the steps, hopefully you can at least get closer to there over time. So
And I think the rationale for doing it needs to be clearly outlined, obviously, because as you say, over time, staff changes. So, 5 years down the road, you're still possibly in the middle of this sort of makeover, if you will. And everybody's, well, why are we doing this? So if we can go back to that planning and have our goals and objectives clearly outlined and how this is going to be implemented, it might actually have a chance to survive any staff changes or budget changes even that occur in the future.
all
So
right, so
planning, planning,
there's,
planning.
yeah, I was gonna say, so have a plan, or especially as an exhibits person, I'm like, okay, here's my plan, and here's my plan B and my plan C. So, but to break it into chunks. So that's great.
Yeah.
So let's just flip that script a little bit. So I think that's great advice, to look at the idea of an audit and to really
Mm-hmm.
reflect and to prioritize things, break it into manageable chunks. I'm sure with the number of projects you've worked on, you have some real pet peeves as it relates to graphic, interpretive design, and wayfinding. So here's your chance to get that bitter bile out of your system, and to sort of to to lay out some things that people should really please try not to do.
All right. Geez. Hope no one gets offended. But I guess please don't wait till the last minute to think about it, because it's going to really not be optimal. I think one of my big pet peeves is, please, too much text. Stop it. No, people are not reading, and just way too much text, I think, for one. I think also keep it simple. I mean, you'll start to see some of these. You'll see graphics, and it's just like, holy crap, where am I supposed to look? What am I supposed to do? It's just a big mismatch. Keep it simple, keep it clean. You don't have to use the latest font that is noisy and fussy and illegible. Designers have this tendency. It's like, oh, it's brand new. Let's try this. It's a bright, shiny object. So I'm going to stick that in the sign. So I think we need to really stick to the basics of what good design is, and not get carried away. And less. I think we don't really need to actually tell the stories with just a sign. I think that we need to explore other ways to engage visitors. I think you and I have talked about this. It's all sorts of things. It's not just text and images on a panel. So that is a pet peeve too, is just signs, too many of them. I could go on, actually. And bad design
No,
as
no,
well.
no. That's. I think that 360-degree view
Mhm.
of all the resources the institution has to bring to bear to share the messages and to have takeaways for visitors is important. I mean, there are some things that are great in a graphic or that are great in an interactive, but they might be even better as a program or something that happens in an interpreted way with a docent or a staff member or volunteer. And I think all those things need to work collectively. So, you know,
Right.
we're back to the beginning again. If everybody's there at the table and we're thinking about the best ways to do the messages and to bring the visitors, a strong visitor experience into consideration, then that's how the project ends up.
So I think, and this isn't necessarily graphic related, but another pet peeve when developing or starting new projects in the exhibit design area is, you know, the client wants interactive, but they don't want them to break, and they don't want to ever maintain them. Just like, well, but yeah, but this one, but look at all these interactives we have, they're all broken. Well, first of all, they probably weren't designed well. That's a problem. And second of all, everything breaks eventually, and you have to maintain it. So there's your reality check again.
One of my good museum pals in the UK, Steve Pizzi, he says, you know, a puppy's not just for Christmas Day. You have to feed it and clean up for it and take care of it and wash it, and, you know, and it's the same thing about interactives. You know, it's so unrealistic to think that, okay, yeah, we want something that's really engaging, that's not going to cost us a lot, that will never break, that, you know, we can just put this into a corner, it will be the most interesting thing in the world, and we don't even have to look at it or touch it for the next 5 years.
Not gonna happen. Yeah.
I mean, the only sort of experience I know like that is the giant meteorite at the American Museum of Natural History. You know, it's this big iron rock that people can touch and they're really fascinated by it. Okay, that's great. But unless you happen to have this gigantic meteorite, I don't know how that's going to work.
Right, you're on luck. So I think that so that's just another little pet peeve around developing interpretive content and design and experience. Sorry, I sort of derailed the conversation there.
Well, that's good. That's why it's a conversation.
Okay.
So rather than end on a pet peeve note and a negative note, let's leave this on a positive note. So if you had to just leave as a last word here, one thing that you think is an actionable takeaway for people who are, you know, looking ahead to new projects and wanting to be mindful of good interpretive design, including graphics and wayfinding, give them a positive boost. Give them something to latch onto to say, man, I saw that video with Ellie and Paul, and I'm really going to be thinking about this, and that's going to make my project a better project.
Collaboration at the beginning of the project. I think that is, and it's possibly one of the most exciting things about creating these projects. It includes graphic design, but I think that the team should be at the table at the beginning. Now, I know we have to manage budgets, and so we're going to have to sort of segment it as we move forward, but we need to have everybody at the table collaborating at the beginning. It's going to give you a better project. And it's actually, I think, ultimately going to save you time because you don't have to backtrack and you don't have to redo. So I think collaboration is the positive, fantastic way to approach all of these projects. And that would be my big recommendation. Do it early and do it often. No, that's not how that goes.
I don't know. As far as collaboration goes, do it early and do it often.
I guess so. That would work.
I think that's good.
It's exciting and better product.
Ellie, I really appreciate you taking the time today. I think it's good. People got some positive takeaways and also some pet peeves to avoid. So that's good. thanks again.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
Yep. Take care.
And thanks for doing this for the community. Take care. All right.
Take care.